I don't know how in the world I'm going to share this testimony with you. My concern is that it's going to be lost. It's going to be lost on people who don't believe, but I know that my responsibility is to share. I have to witness to what God is doing and what this covenant is all about. That's my job as a witness, is to share with you that biblical miracles and the biblical God that produces miracles by his sovereign choice and his mercy, he still exists. He still does these things for his people when his people have biblical faith. And I've told you guys that on this channel, that if you don't have biblical faith, don't expect to see biblical miracles. It's become increasingly harder for me to share my testimony, not because my testimony isn't real and deeper and God isn't performing greater things in my life, but because I know that people don't believe. Or maybe they believe that that could be possible for me and that this is my covenant, but they don't have the same covenant. They're not required to live the same things. And so while I'm suffering and while I'm sharing things, vulnerable things with you guys, I just feel like it's going to be wasted. Because it has been. Because no one has responded to the things they need to be doing in their own covenant. If you've been listening to this channel for a little while, you know that my home was set for auction and God sent these fires in Altadena, and I live in a nearby city. I live about a half a mile away from that Eaton Canyon golf course, and the auction was delayed. I received a notice that my power was going to be shut off, and over 6 months later, I still have power, I still have gas, but then my home, ultimately, after that 3-month delay, was auctioned, and I was being stalked and harassed, but God told me, stay in the land. That's what he said to me, stay in the land. So that's what I've continued to do, even though it would be easier for me to have left the land. That's how I have felt, is that it would be easier for me to just go live with my kids and know that all of these things are provided between the three of us. But no, he said to stay in the land. Then he told me that I saved my house by putting my house up for his. And what he was using as a metaphor was the building that I own, though not much longer, I'm sure. But he told me to keep that building when it was time to sell it in order to save my house. So what he was saying is put up your own house for mine, potentially. And I knew that. I knew that I wasn't going to have the money to be able to pay the mortgage or any of the bills on my house, but that's what I did, because that's what he told me to do. And I knew that's what he was telling me to do, and so I knew that he would provide a way. And so he said to me, you saved your house by putting it up for mine. And I understood the metaphor that he was using with me. And a week later, he told me to go to the building and to clear out the things that I wanted to take, because that was the last time I was going to be there. And he said to abandon that house because he's getting ready to abandon his house. And of course, that building is what he's used in order to teach me how to care for his house. So I did exactly that, and I shared with you, and I was in deep grief over it, having put everything that I had into serving his house and paying for that building, right? So my retirement, my savings, then putting my house up for his, while not understanding, just like when Jeremiah was told, go, Nebuchadnezzar is laying, or Babylon is laying siege to Jerusalem. Hey, go buy your cousin's field. And Jeremiah's like, what? Why? Lord, you're telling me that Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem, and why are you telling me to buy this field? And God has his reasons. And he goes on to tell Jeremiah the reasons for that. Same thing. Same wonky, weird stuff that God tells us to do. But nothing belongs to us. So if he tells us to do it, we do it. And so I abandoned that house. And I received a 3-day notice to get out of this house. And I did not, because God told me to stay in the land. And so a few weeks later, I received a 5-day notice with a court order that I needed to leave by the 27th. And I had determined that on the night of the 27th that if God didn't do anything, I was going to have to leave because I wasn't going to wait until the sheriff walked me out. And my kids confronted me and they said, God is telling me that you need to stay, that you need to walk this all the way through, and that God has not changed the plan. And I was angry when they first told me that, because I thought, what am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? I pushed this hard. No one else is going through this. I pushed this far, but I heard what they said. God has not changed the plan. And I took it up with God, and I stayed here that night. And I wondered if I was going to be walked out by the sheriff in the morning. And I'm still here, you guys. It's the 13th of August. I'm in this house. No sheriff has come. No new owner has come. No one has come to take me away from my house, from the property, from the land that God told me to stay in. But he required me to go all the way through with my faith. I was receiving knocks on the door and notices on my door regarding my dog and telling me that I was in violation. I'm in violation because I haven't registered my dog. Well, in order to register your dog, you have to get him vaccinated here in California. And I don't vaccinate my dogs. And I've taken it up with God, because I don't take my dogs or myself or my children to a field that denies that there is a creator. I know my covenant with God. I know that he is my creator and that he is the Lord who heals me. I know that because of what he's proven. And I know that because of Exodus 15:26. In which he clearly states that. So I don't go and submit myself or those in my care to science or to doctors or to idols. But I kept receiving these notices, and I went back to God and I said, look, you know the reason I haven't done this. You know the reason I have not registered her is because I don't vaccinate her. And I have taken this up with you. And I'm not going to submit. I'm going to trust that you're going to take care of this. And they're gone too. And no one is harassing me. And no one is stalking me. Even though they have a court order to do so. God started calling me out to take out this clematis vine that had gotten really kind of out of control. And it was, on the porch or off of the porch. And it was climbing up the rain chain up to my roof. And of course, when it was green and had beautiful clematis on it, it was really a beautiful sight to see. But now the clematis had died back, and so I needed to clean it up. And so he was telling me, get out there and do it today. I went outside and I cleared away the clematis, which was a huge mess to deal with. And I watered everything, and I worked a little bit in the yard, watered all my fruit trees, and I heard a truck pull up. And I heard the clanking of tools. And I knew what was going on. I knew that my water was being shut off. I had spent that whole morning working in the yard and cleaning up, washing my porch real well, washing the banister. And everything was super clean outside, but I wasn't so clean, and now I didn't have any water to take a shower. And I had to make sense of all of this. And so I came inside the house. And I started taking it up with God. Lord, I can't live without water. What are you doing? I gave up everything to you. I asked you if I could make the smart investment decisions that I had in my mind to sell both of these properties and go and buy something outright, go to a different area. I was set as far as the world is concerned in terms of money. I was already semi-retired when he called me to himself. I obviously had enough money to be able to pay the mortgages on a building and my home with, between my savings and my retirement. So I had obviously made some, been responsible enough to do that. And yet this isn't what he had me do. He had me continue paying on things and watching that money just sort of dwindle. And according to the world standards, we would call that squandering. We would not think that that was very smart. But, the thing is, if God tells you to do something, you do it. And you do it the way that he says to do it. And the thing also is that if I had done what I wanted to do, which was to go and make smart investment decisions that I had made, obviously, I would have thought that this was of myself. I would have thought that I was the one who did all of this. And I would have given credit to God, and I would have said, he had me gain this wealth in order to blah, blah, blah. But that isn't what he had me do. He brought me down to nothing so that he could prove that he is God. And I want, and this is something that he's been talking with me about today as I've been talking with him, is about his grace. Grace is not unmerited favor. If you have a covenant that you're fulfilling, there's merit there, y'all. I mean, newsflash, unmerited favor, really? That's like the wicked definition that we have of grace from Billy Graham, who prostituted himself and fornicated with the important people of the world. Why are we listening to someone like that? The word defines grace as God's sovereign choice and mercy. And the word defines our covenant as being bidirectional. If then. It's an if-then covenant. If you obey, then you will receive the reward. If you fulfill, then you will receive. But if you don't, you won't. You want to know what the witnesses are doing here right now? Isaiah 33:8 says, the highways are deserted, no travelers on the roads. The covenant is broken. Its witnesses are despised. No one is respected. You want to know why it is that God has me living this out in front of you like a spectacle on display? He has me living this out to be a witness to what? To the covenant. The covenant is broken. Its witnesses are despised. No one is respected. That's why I get on here and I say, no one's going to believe this. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I want to just talk with my kids about it because they're the only ones who respond. You think I want to keep telling my vulnerable story about the decisions that I've made and get the messages that I do from people who say, this is your fault? You're the one who did this to yourself? You made bad decisions and you're not taking responsibility? People don't get it. They don't know what this covenant is all about, what's required of us. But I'm witnessing to you about the covenant. I'm witnessing it not only through my words, but through my lived testimony. And you know what? We're despised, us witnesses, and no one is respected. No one cares. They treat God's prophets the same way they've always treated God's prophets, digging a pit for them, listening to what they say, for the purpose of waiting for them to fall, for the purpose of waiting for them to be foiled. Has God foiled me? Well, I want to tell you what he's been doing. I couldn't share this with you the first week, and even with my kids were asking, like, what is God doing with this? What is he doing with this? And I couldn't tell them. It was like a week into it, I had to just listen to what he was saying and showing me and building me in the way that he was breaking me. Now, not all of us have had our water shut off. I don't think I ever have, except for a repair. And when when a plumber has shut off the water, there's no water, period. There's no more water left. And I have had moments here where there was no water. It was bone dry. Nothing, not even a drop. But then there have been moments where I had water. How do you explain that? Enough water to take care of myself. Enough water to clean myself, to brush my teeth, to wash my dishes. And then there have been moments where there was nothing. I want you to listen to this. That sound like water to you? Early on, when God drew me to himself, he taught me that fear that we feel, the feeling of fear, after he had driven out the spirit of fear, he started teaching me about that. And one of the ways that he taught me about it was to recall to mind, being a child and being in the store with your parent, and they're off doing their thing and you get kind of preoccupied, and then your parent turns the next aisle and you're like, where's my parent? And you panic because you're separated from them. You have that feeling of fear as a child for being separated from your parent. That's a feeling that is logical and is a consequence of not staying close to them. And he taught me through that metaphor that every time you separate from me, you're going to have this feeling. And when you have that feeling, you need to know that it is because you need to return to me. You need to turn from whatever you're trying to do in your flesh and whatever imaginations the devil is trying to plant in your mind. You need to turn from all of that, and you need to make your choice known that you are choosing me and that your focus is on me. And every time I did that, it was like a dance, because God would give me the feeling of fear, and I would know, okay, I've got to turn this way. Anyone who's ever taken, couples dance or ballroom dance, like, you know what this is all about, right? And as the woman, you start attuning yourself to the way that the man is leading you, how he's pulling your body, turning your wrist, and you know when you need to spin, when you need to turn, when you need to step forward, when you need to step back. You are communicating that way, and God is communicating that way with us. When the water was first turned off, God started out by showing me that he could give me water and that he could take that water away just as quickly. And so he was doing this thing where sometimes I'd have water and sometimes I wouldn't. And so what I did was I started getting buckets and filling up buckets and collecting water. But the more I tried to take that into my own hands, the less water he gave me out of the tap. And he started to talk to me about it and tell me that he will give me what I need. Does that sound familiar to you? Does it sound familiar? You remember the story of the manna? He will give you what you need, and you are to take only what you need for the moment or for the day. And the day before Sabbath, you are to collect what is needed for the Sabbath, and that's it. Otherwise, he's going to send maggots and stench to your manna. Otherwise, he's going to make your pipes bone dry. And that's what he started doing to me when I started collecting and trying to take it up by the work of my own hands. So I learned that lesson. Then he started talking to me about the refining process that needs to happen in these last less than 2 months of my life. And the very things that I have not been able to get a hold of myself, that I have not responded to or I'm still struggling with, when I turn to them, I have no water. When I stay in him, I have water. I'm not making this up. You'd have to be a real lunatic to do the things that I've done. And trust me, I've questioned my sanity before. Like, is this real that you're actually carrying me through this? He is. This is the covenant. It kind of reminds me of when the Israelites were fighting the Amalekites, and Moses, every time that he raised his hands, the Israelites were winning, but if he put his hands down, the Amalekites were winning. I mean, it's really like that. And he started putting this inside of me and telling me, what if I made your laundry? What if I made your washing machine work? And I gave you enough water to be able to wash a load of laundry. Am I able to do that? Am I able to give you enough water to take a shower? And the very first thing that I said to my daughter within minutes after the water was shut off, I sent a text message to my daughter and my son, and I said, my water's just been shut off. And my daughter FaceTimed me immediately, and she said, and I was like, I don't understand why God would do this. But the first thing I said was, you know what? No, God can bring water out of a rock. The driest thing, like he chose the driest thing ever that he brought water out of. He can take care of me. He told me to stay in this land. I didn't waver on what he said. I didn't say, well, maybe it was a false alarm. Maybe I need a different plan. I just didn't understand yet. But I know that God is capable of doing these things. I know that he's capable of watering my yard even without any rain. Doesn't it tell us that in 2 Kings chapter 3? It says that God is able to fill up the pools of the earth without rain. This is an easy thing for him to do. And so, look, I have camped a lot of my life for fun, not out of necessity. You know, I raised my daughter camping. We would go to the river. We'd go to the mountains. So I know how to camp. And I'm aware that I could easily go and buy one of those 7-gallon jugs of water, and I could use that water and, purify some of it for drinking, use some of it for bathing, use some of it for washing my dishes. But see, if I do that, if I take it up by the work of my own hands, God already showed me. He already demonstrated to me that when I was collecting water, that he he basically said, all right, you have a choice. Like, do you want to trust me, or do you want to do this by the work of your hands? If that's what you're going to do, and you're not going to trust me to give you what you need as you need it, then I'll hand you over to the work of your own hands. I already know that this is what he does. It's what I've taught you. If you're going to choose that spirit of self-idolatry and the work of your own hands, then that's what you'll be handed over to. And so I took to scripture, and I resisted the temptation to go and buy one of those 7-gallon jugs, and I took to scripture, and I started standing in scripture, because I know what it says in 2 Kings chapter 3 is that the king of Israel and the king of Judah, Moab is wanting to fight against them. So they come together, and he brings these two kings together, and they go and consult with Elijah. And because Elijah has respect for Jehoshaphat, he says, he gives them a word. He doesn't like the other king. I'm going to read it to you. 2 Kings chapter 3. Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel and Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Now Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to pay the king of Israel a tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time, King Joram set out from Samaria and mobilized all Israel. He also sent this message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go with you, he replied. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. By what route shall we attack, he asked. Through the desert of Edom, he answered. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or for the animals with them. What, exclaimed the king of Israel, has the Lord called us 3 kings together only to deliver us into the hands of Moab? But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. I said Elijah earlier, it's Elisha. Elisha said to the king of Israel, why do you want to involve me? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab. Elisha said, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not pay attention to any attention to you. But now bring me a harpist. While the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came on Elisha, and he said, this is what the Lord says, I will fill this valley with pools of water. For this is what the Lord says, you will see neither wind nor rain, yet this valley will be filled with water, and you and your cattle and your other animals will drink. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also deliver Moab into your hands. You will overthrow every fortified city and every major town. You will cut down every good tree and stop up all the springs, and ruin every good field with stones. The next morning, about the time for offering the sacrifice, there it was, water flowing from the direction of Edom, and the land was filled with water. Now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come to fight against them, so every man, young and old, who could bear arms, was called up and stationed on the border. When they got up early in the morning, the sun was shining on the water. To the Moabites across the way, the water looked red, like blood. That's blood, they said. Those kings must have fought and slaughtered each other. Now to the plunder Moab. But when the Moabites came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and fought them until they fled. And the Israelites invaded the land and slaughtered the Moabites. They destroyed the towns, and each man threw a stone on every good field until it was covered. They stopped up all the springs and cut down every good tree. Only Kir-Hareseth was left with its stones in place, but men armed with slings surrounded it and attacked it. All right. So what I am wanting to say about this, first of all, is that God has given me every scripture and every instruction that I've needed in order to do what he requires of me in the covenant. And what he has pointed out to me here is that he is able to do anything. He's able to bring water from a rock. He's able to fill the pools of the earth with water without even sending rain. He's able to even use that in order to defeat our enemies, making them think that that water is blood. And the other thing that stood out to me is what they said about, has God brought us three together in order to deliver us into the hands of Moab? And this is something that he was really pressing on me. Have I brought you this far in order to, and told you to stay in the land in order to kill all your trees and your harvest and everything that you have here? Why would I have you stay here to sit and watch everything die and to not give you what you need? But in order for you to receive that, you have to believe that. Listen to what I just said. In order for you to receive that, you have to actually believe it. And this is the first time that God has put me in a position where, you know, when the power was going to be shut off, there wasn't a 7-gallon jug of power that I had the option to go and utilize. There was someone on the channel who offered to pay off my balance and to establish my power, but God told me not to utilize that. He told me I'm going to be glorified in this. And so he did give me the option of utilizing something outside of him in order to take care of it. But see, I had already taken it up with God before that person offered. I knew that I could reach out to him and that he would probably help me in that situation, but God said not to utilize it. When I was going to be kicked out of this house, I had the option of going to my kid's house, just like, you know, in Jeremiah 42, where God is talking with the Israelites that remain after Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem. He said, you guys are to stay in this land. I've relented concerning the disaster I brought on you. You're to stay in this land. And they asked Jeremiah, inquire of the Lord, what should we do? And he said, if you're determined to go to Egypt, where you say there's no war and my bread will be supplied. What's the implication, guys? The implication is that, you know, we think like God gave them a land. Why were they so stupid that they would go to Egypt or that they would disobey him or whatever? They were dealing with certain things in that land. It wasn't easy to remain where God told them to remain. You see that. They had to rely on God to send the rain. They had to rely on him and they had to obey because that's the covenant that God established with us. And if they didn't obey, so it was a constant checking of oneself, testing of oneself when God sent destruction, when God sent affliction. The person had to continually check and test themselves to see, well, why is God sending this to me? Now, there's something very similar in my situation. I can go to Egypt and I can have a guarantee that this is going to be paid and that it will be supplied, or I can rely on God. I can go and get those 7-gallon jugs and fill them up with water. And I can know that this is going to be supplied, and I can even say, God has provided this for me. But what have I believed? If he can bring water out of a rock, he can darn sure do this. And I took it up with him. And I said, this is the first time that you have provided me with this other option. In these other situations, there wasn't like a 7-gallon jug of power, and there wasn't a 7-gallon jug of house that I was going to be able to utilize. I could leave the land, and I could go live with my kids, but you told me to stay in the land, and you haven't changed the plan. And I feel you telling me that if I go and get those 7-gallon jugs, then I've conceded that you are limited, and that you're not capable of providing what you have promised to provide, that I need to go utilize something else. And if I'm worried about these plants and these fruit trees and my crops, then I don't trust that where you have brought me, you're able to keep me. So I need you to teach me what you're requiring of me right now. And I have resisted doing anything by the work of my own hands since he has begun to teach me these things. And what I've done is I've gone to scripture, I've gone to my journal, I've sorted these things out with him, and I've stayed in step with him. And any time that I have separated, there's no water. Even in the slightest bit. And I'm not talking about separated and went and did something by the work of my own hands. I mean, I'm distracting myself with something. When I separate, there's no water. when I am in him, there's water. And there's enough water for what I need. And I notice that I'm not feeling that anxiety anymore when I turn on the water, like the water's going to run out. There's water in my bathroom sink. There's water in my shower. There's water in my kitchen sink. And I want you to know, my water has been shut off. And that these were all bone dry at certain times when I did not have the ability to understand the faith that he was requiring me to live in. I was living at one time with ants in my kitchen because I didn't have water to wash my dishes. And this was while collecting water. I didn't have enough water to wash my dishes. There were ants coming into my kitchen. And I had the option to go and get that 7-gallon jug of water. And it was very, very tempting because I was feeling desperate and helpless. But I did what I did, and I really felt him pushing me to do the very thing and to stand in the faith that was required when I stayed until the 28th. When I stayed here until the 28th, and I said, no, I'm going to give you everything that I have, even if I am carried out by the sheriff in front of my neighbors. I'm going to give you every single thing that I have, Lord. I hope this isn't lost. I know it's going to be lost on some people, maybe most, I don't know. But I am witnessing to you what the covenant is all about. And if you think that my covenant is different from yours, you got another thing coming. The reason God has raised witnesses to live in this way right now is to witness the covenant to you. Because most of you don't think that this kind of faith is required of you. And I don't know why, because you have a Bible that tells you what's required of you, that tells you that the very people who kill you are going to claim to be doing a service to God. The implication is you're going to be killed. What do you think? Are you going to be able to stand? Paul said you haven't yet resisted sin to the point of shedding your own blood. If you can't live like this, how are you going to die like that? A while back when we were still observing Saturday Sabbath, whatever that is, right? Now it seems like a big old joke because, like, where's Saturday in the Bible? But this was before we even started with the new moon or the Sabbath according to the new moon. Someone was with us who would say things like, use me, Lord, use me. And that's what I hear people say all the time when they come to him. They're so happy about the truth and everything else. Use me, until they discover how they need to be used. Until they discover that they're going to be crushed and broken and they're going to have to make decisions that are going to be really hard. But that they're going to need to trust that God is faithful and that he's real. Well, someone was with us who previously had said, I don't have enough time with God because of the job that I'm working. I'll become a dog walker. I'll do any job if only I have more time with God. And they prayed that. They prayed that to God. And God gave them a job in the very company that they worked for. Can you imagine? He opened something up for them, an opportunity in the company that they already worked for. And they acknowledged the glory of God. They acknowledged that came from God. And they had more time with him. And they were coming to Sabbath assembly, and they were saying, I'm going to have to leave a little early because there's some stuff that I have to do for work. And I finally confronted her and I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is Sabbath. You don't get to come here and assemble with us and then cut time short or disrupt because you've decided that you're not actually fully in it and fully going to observe God's Sabbath and his command not to work. And she broke up with us by text, which is what people usually do, saying, I know this is a test, but I just can't do it. I know this is a test, but I just can't do it. That is such a basic thing. And this is something that was like, you can go out and people have a repertoire in the world for a Saturday Sabbath, right? Okay, well, on this day, every week, I'm going to need to take this time off because for religious reasons. They couldn't even do that. How in the world would that person be brought into the actual Sabbath, which doesn't occur on the same day every week, doesn't occur on the same day every Gregorian month, because a Gregorian month doesn't correlate with God's months. And so now you're just going to have to submit these dates that for religious reasons, according to the new moon, I've got to take off. How are you going to do that when you can't even do something so basic as one day a week, I'm going to need this day off? It's sickening. I can't even believe it. Like, God can perform all these other miracles. He can cast out that spirit of fear and give you peace, give you joy, introduce himself to you. But we can't put our money where our mouth is. We can't wait that extra day and say, no, look, I believe in God. He told me to stay in this land. And if I'm wrong about it, at least I know that I will not have sold him short and claimed to have believed in him, but wasn't able to fulfill my faith. And the covenant, which requires belief. One of the other scriptures that God had led me to was, I think it's Isaiah 7, in a similar situation in which this time it was the king of Israel who was going to overtake the king of Jerusalem, or the kingdom. The king of Israel was going to overtake the kingdom of Judah, of Jerusalem. And they were, Jerusalem, they heard about it, and they were, it says something to the effect of they were shaken as trees in the forest are shaken by the wind. And God responds and he says, this is not going to happen. It will not happen. And then he says, if you don't stand firm in your faith, you won't stand at all. So it's not like God comes around and he's like, oh yeah, this really stinks. And, I'm sorry. Let me just make this better for you. He doesn't do that. He said it's not going to happen. He didn't tell them the plan. He said it's not going to happen. And if you don't stand firm in your faith, if you don't stand firm in what I'm telling you, you won't stand at all. It's a command, not a suggestion. It is a requirement in your covenant to have that kind of faith. We call it biblical faith because unfortunately, there's a blatant difference between what people are calling faith right now versus what they were living in the Bible. But that biblical faith is the only faith, I'm here to tell you. There is no other faith. There's no other definition of the covenant or of faith. You have to take it all the way. God told me stay in the land. Where are my enemies, guys? Where are my enemies? Where is the officer who kept coming here and harassing me and putting notes on my door? Where is he? Where are the people who were harassing me to get me out? Where is their enforcement of this order? It doesn't matter, does it? Because God has driven them away and he has kept his promises to me. And blessed is she who has believed that God would keep his promises to her. God is real. And this faith is real. There's no science that can explain this, that can explain having bone-dry pipes and having running water in every single faucet as long as you are staying close to God. There is nothing that can explain that but a merciful and sovereign God. Go ask him if my testimony is true. And if my testimony is not true, may he completely destroy me and wipe my name from his book of life. My testimony is true. And when he testifies to it, ask him what it means for you. Years ago when I was going through certain things and we had a body or a larger group of people who were meeting, I was going through stuff that God was taking me through as an offering, and I was telling people, you need to lean into this offering. You need to lean into what this means for you, or you're going to go through the things I'm going through and worse. And for some reason, people could not do it. They couldn't understand or comprehend that God would require that. Do you know why? Because this is the way that they've treated Jesus. Like his offering is just something that's been handed over to them. Not that they need to lean into it, not that they need to learn from it, not that they need to become like him. It's been handed to them. Why would they need to think any more about it? But you can't be like that. If you want to make it, you're going to need to become like him. You're going to need to participate in the sufferings of Christ. And you're going to need to be proven in your covenant if you're going to be saved. You have to be proven. This is why you're being tested, so that on the other end of the test, if you pass it, you've been proven that your faith is genuine. But if you don't pass the test, or you do it with a backup plan for God, how can you make it? If you don't stand in your faith, you will not stand at all.